The government doesn't ban things because they're dangerous. It bans things because they make you independent. Right now, there are 11 categories of ownership: seeds, tools, medicines, energy systems being quietly regulated, restricted, and reclassified out of your hands. Not in some distant future. This is happening in active legislation right now in state capitals and federal agencies. Today, I'm going to name them, explain exactly why they're being targeted, and tell you how to secure them before the window closes. Here's the pattern you need to recognize. Every major restriction on personal ownership follows the same playbook. First, the item gets associated with fringe users, people labeled dangerous or irresponsible. Second, a regulatory body introduces safety standards that happen to require expensive licensing. Commercial compliance or outright prohibition of private use. Third, the market consolidates. A handful of corporations now sell you back what you used to own outright, at a monthly fee with kill switches built in, dependent on their infrastructure. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's documented economic history. It happened with raw milk, which fed American families for centuries, now banned or severely restricted in 21 states. Not because of proven danger to informed consumers, but because it competed with the pasteurized dairy industry. It happened with certain heirloom crop varieties, quietly displaced by patented seeds you cannot legally replant. It's happening right now with well water rights, wood stove emission standards, and shortwave radio modifications. The average American household pays what economists call a dependency premium, an estimated $4,000 to $8,000 per year in costs that wouldn't exist if they owned the means of meeting their own basic needs. That's not utility bills. Those are separate. That's the markup on convenience, the replacement cost of disposable appliances, and the access fees on systems that used to be freely reproducible. What I'm about to walk you through isn't a list of fringe items. It's a list of things your grandparents owned without a second thought that are now being legally reclassified in ways that will restrict your access within 5 years. In some cases, less. Buy them now while you still can. Number 1. Open pollinated and heirloom seeds. Let's start with the one that affects every single person watching this, so regardless of where you live. Open pollinated seeds, seeds that produce plants whose offspring are genetically identical to the parent, are the biological foundation of food independence. You plant once, you harvest, you save seed, you plant again, indefinitely. That cycle is what allowed human civilization to persist through every famine, war, and supply chain collapse in recorded history. Here's what they don't tell you. The 2018 and 2022 farm bills, combined with several state-level seed labeling laws, are actively narrowing what qualifies as a commercially viable variety. Seed libraries, community institutions that have operated for decades, are being classified as seed dealers in states like Pennsylvania and Minnesota, subject to licensing fees and testing requirements that make free seed sharing legally precarious. The corporate seed market, dominated by a handful of multinational companies, has reduced the available commercial vegetable variety catalog by over 90% since 1900. 90%. The USDA's own data confirms this. What's left on the commercial shelf is optimized for shelf life and transport, not nutrition or seed viability. Your move: source from the Seed Savers Exchange, Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds, or Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. Budget $50 to $150 for a diversified starting collection. Learn to properly dry and store seed in sealed glass with desiccant packets. A well-maintained seed collection is a multi-generational asset. This is ownership. Number 2, non-electronic firearms and standard capacity magazines. Whatever your position on gun policy, this is a practical ownership conversation, not a political one. Legislation restricting magazine capacity is already law in 14 states. Proposals for federal smart gun mandates requiring firearms to include electronic authentication systems have been introduced in multiple congressional sessions. The mechanism matters here. Electronic dependency means kill switches, software vulnerabilities, and parts obsolescence. A mechanical firearm from 1950 with 0 electronic components can be maintained with basic tools and machine replacement parts. An electronically authenticated firearm from 2027 becomes legally and functionally inoperable the moment its manufacturer discontinues software support or the moment the regulatory environment changes. Beyond self-defense considerations, a functional long arm is a food production tool for anyone practicing self-reliance. Historically, during the 1930s Dust Bowl and throughout both world wars, rural American families depended on hunting to close caloric gaps that the commercial food system couldn't fill. That function doesn't disappear in modern disruptions. If this category applies to your circumstances and local laws, the practical guidance is prioritize entirely mechanical platforms, purchase spare parts for the components that wear, extractors, springs, firing pins, and understand how to perform basic maintenance yourself. Spare magazines for legal platforms are significantly cheaper today than they will be under future restriction. Number 3. Rainwater collection systems. This one surprises people every time. In 9 states, including Colorado until 2016, and still significantly restricted in several western states, collecting rainwater that falls on your own roof is legally regulated and in some jurisdictions prohibited without a permit. The legal theory is prior appropriation water rights, but the practical result is that you can be fined for collecting water from the sky. This is not a stable regulatory situation. As municipal water systems age, and the American Society of Civil Engineers gives U.S. water infrastructure a D+, water utility pricing is rising at 2 to 3 times the rate of general inflation. The pressure to monetize every water source, including private collection, is increasing. A properly installed 2,500-gallon rainwater cistern routed through a first flush diverter and filtered appropriately can supply a household's non-potable needs, garden irrigation, toilet flushing, livestock, indefinitely. In most of the continental U.S., average annual rainfall is sufficient to fill such a system multiple times over. Install now while your jurisdiction allows it. Document your system under current regulations. The cost runs $500 to $3,000 for a well-built gravity-fed setup, depending on tank size. Now, first flush diverters cost under $50 and prevent the most contaminated initial runoff from entering your collection. This is infrastructure you own, on land you own, collecting a resource that falls from the sky. Here's what most people miss about all 3 of those items. The restrictions aren't designed to protect you. They're designed to ensure that your food, your water, and your security remain products someone else sells to you. The next items on this list follow the exact same logic, and a few of them are already further along in the restriction pipeline than you'd expect. Number 4. Wood-burning stoves, pre-EP. A. Step 2 models. In 2020, the EPA's Step 2 wood heater regulations went into full effect, and requiring all new wood stoves to meet particulate emission standards that effectively eliminated most traditional cast iron designs from commercial sale. The regulatory pressure is now shifting toward existing stoves. Several state air quality districts, particularly in California, Colorado, and Washington, already restrict or ban operation of non-certified stoves with inspection and replacement programs in development. A well-made cast iron wood stove from the 1970s or 1980s, brands like Vermont Castings, Jutul, or Fisher, is a more robust heating system than most modern EPA-certified stoves. It burns hotter, it's simpler to maintain, and critically, it has no electronic components that can fail. During the Texas grid collapse of February 2021, over 700 people were hospitalized for hypothermia. Millions lost heat for days or weeks. A properly installed wood-burning stove with a seasoned cord of firewood on hand would have made that crisis a manageable inconvenience instead of a life-threatening emergency. Find quality pre-Step 2 stoves at estate sales, rural auctions, and local listings. Expect to pay $100 to $500 for a stove that would cost $2,000 to $4,000 new in a compliant version. Have it inspected by a certified chimney professional, install correctly per local code, and maintain a minimum 1-cord wood supply, roughly 128 cubic feet, for your heating season. Number 5. Certain herbal and botanical preparations. The FDA's current regulatory framework for dietary supplements, established under DSHEA in 1994, has faced sustained legislative pressure for over a decade. Proposed updates, including new dietary ingredient notification requirements, would require pre-market approval for many botanical preparations that have been in continuous use for centuries. The practical effect would be making many single herb tinctures and concentrated plant preparations commercially non-viable, effectively removing them from legal sale. This is the chemical ancestor of pharmaceutical pressure. When a plant compound cannot be patented, the alternative is to regulate the delivery mechanism until only licensed manufacturers can produce it at scale. Elderberry, echinacea, valerian, Oregon grapefruit. These are not fringe substances. They have centuries of documented ethnobotanical use, and in many cases, peer-reviewed studies confirming specific mechanisms of action. Oregon grapefruit contains berberine, an alkaloid with demonstrated antimicrobial properties. Elderberry preparations have been studied in randomized controlled trials for influenza symptom duration. Your path: learn basic tincture making now. It's a simple maceration process requiring only food-grade alcohol and time. Grow or ethically source the species you rely on. Educational organizations and botanical resources can guide safe identification and preparation. A modest investment in dried elderberries and a bottle of 80-proof alcohol can produce a preparation equivalent to far more in retail syrup. This is knowledge you own. Number 6. Unregistered analog ham radio equipment. Amateur radio licensing in the U.S. is administered by the FCC, and the equipment itself is broadly legal for licensed operators. But here's what's changing. FCC proceedings are examining software-defined radio devices, certain modified transceivers, and imported radio equipment that doesn't meet certification requirements. At the same time, spectrum allocation pressure from commercial wireless expansion is compressing amateur bands. The practical concern for self-reliance purposes is this. In any scenario where the internet and cellular networks fail, whether from extreme weather, infrastructure failure, or overload, amateur radio is the only long-range communication infrastructure you personally own and control. It requires no subscription, no tower company, no internet provider. A technician class amateur radio license requires passing a 35-question multiple-choice exam, and the knowledge base is genuinely useful. You learn propagation, antenna theory, and emergency communication protocols. A quality HF transceiver capable of long-distance communication can be found used for several $100s. A VHF or UHF handheld suitable for local emergency networks can cost far less. Get licensed, build or purchase a simple dipole antenna. Join a local amateur radio emergency group to participate in practice communication networks. The equipment you assemble today, maintained properly, can function for decades with no external subscription required. Notice the pattern. Every system I've described is being regulated from the point of access: the commercial sale, the licensing exam, the permitted installation. They can't easily take what you already own and know. That's exactly why timing matters. The next items are ones where the regulatory window is closing faster than most people realize. Let me pull back and explain the structural reason why items like these come under pressure, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The modern economic system often favors recurring revenue models. Every time a capability moves from something you own to something you rent, 3 things happen. A revenue stream is created. Your vulnerability increases because you depend on continued service, and the provider gains leverage to change pricing or access terms. Previous generations often maintained more direct control over food storage, heating, water access, and repair skills. Many of those capabilities have gradually shifted towards centralized systems that trade convenience for dependency. Engineers use the term graceful degradation to describe systems that continue functioning even as components age. Durable physical tools, mechanical systems, and stored knowledge often degrade slowly and predictably. Many modern consumer products are designed differently, optimized for cost and replacement cycles rather than lifetime durability. History provides a clear example. During World War II, millions of American households grew victory gardens, producing a substantial share of the nation's vegetables. Distributed local capability proved resilient during supply stress. The same principles still apply. The pattern is clear. The timing is predictable. And for many categories of practical self-reliance, access depends on preparation made before you urgently need it. The system doesn't need you to be afraid. It needs you to be prepared. Those are not the same thing, and confusing them is how most people end up doing nothing. What I've given you today isn't a manifesto. It's a strategic argument for acquiring practical capabilities while they are accessible. Food production, water management, heat backup, preservation skills, communication tools, energy resilience, and knowledge. You don't need to do everything at once. Start with the area where you're most vulnerable. If you lack backup heat, start there. If you have no stored food, start there. If you've never grown anything, start there. One capability implemented is far more valuable than a long list never acted on. Here's one concrete next step. Choose a single practical skill or resource you can begin this season. Learn it, implement it, and make it functional. That single action builds independence in a way planning alone never will. Ownership isn't a slogan, it's a strategy, and the time to implement it is always before you need it.